Welcome to Ditch the Classroom. This is your host, Ariana Vernier, and I'm so excited that you're here. I'm a teacher turned business coach who is so passionate about helping fellow mamas like you ditch the classroom and pursue your big, hairy, scary dreams. Imagine a life where you could still impact the world, but do so while following your passions and spending more time with your babies. In Ditch the Classroom, we'll explore ways you can do just that. Myself, guest experts, and amazing teachers who have also built a successful business will share tools, tips, and resources to help you ditch the classroom too. Are you ready? Here we go. Y'all, do I have a special episode for you? We are kicking off 2022 on an amazing foot. I had the pleasure of interviewing Erin Waters from the School of Sellers podcast. Erin is a teacher turned business owner and podcast host, and she helps so many teachers create their TPT businesses selling their Teachers Pay Teachers resources. So she came on the show today and shared her wisdom around what mindset shifts teachers need to make when they're considering ditching the classroom and what's really holding them back. So I know you guys are going to love this episode. I cannot wait for you to hear a little more from her. But before we jump in, I want to remind you that you need to hurry your butt on over and sign up for the free workshop I have starting next Thursday, January 13th. It's the number one way to leave teaching in 6 months or less. And I'm going to be teaching you how you can replace your teaching income from home with your babies by your side and finally pay off that debt and take those dream family vacations. If you can't tune in live, that's okay. Those who register will get access to the replay of the workshop, but make sure you register because you're not going to get it if you don't. So you can sign up for the free workshop at arianavernier.com/free-workshop. That's arianavernier.com/free-workshop, or find the link in the show notes. All right, without further ado, let's jump on into today's interview. Hey, Erin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun being like our back-to-back recordings for our different shows. So this has just been something I've been looking forward to a lot. Thank you.
Awesome. I would love if you could just share with my listeners a little bit about you before we really dive into the meat of the episode. Tell us about your family, your teaching experience, and just how you've gotten to where you are today.
Sure. So I've kind of been a little all over the place, but growing up, I always wanted to be a teacher. Like that was just my dream. There was really never a ton of questions about the route that I would take. And I loved teaching, and I taught for several years before I started my family. So my husband and I were actually both elementary teachers. He taught third grade and I taught first grade. We were actually at the same school for several years, but we found right away that once we started our family, it was really hard to make the teaching schedule work. So it was just kind of a learning curve, definitely, when it came to teaching and having kids at the same time. So around the same time that we started our family, I also became involved in Teachers Pay Teachers, where I started creating resources that I was basically already making for my classroom anyway, but I started selling them on the site. And to make a very long story short, I now do that full time, but I also teach other teachers how to get started on TPT if that's something that they're interested in. So it's just been wide exciting.
That's awesome. I see a lot of similarities in both of our stories because I was the same. We waited a couple of years of me teaching before we started our family. And then, we just quickly realized, this teaching is not going to allow me to be the mom that I want to be. So that's super cool. And I don't think a lot of people realize, a lot of people go to TPT and buy resources for their classroom, or they even make their own and then end up like selling a couple on TPT, but they don't realize that this can be their full-time thing if they really want it to be. So that's super cool. And I know my listeners will love to learn more about that from you.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And like any other teacher who ends up doing something that's not teaching, it still feels weird some days. I'm like, wait,
Mhm.
what do I do now? I thought I was going to be a teacher when I grew up. So it's really fun to share that journey with other teachers. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
So we're not going to be talking too much about TPT today. So for those listening, you can learn everything you need to know about that from Erin's podcast, The School of Sellers. But what we're going to be diving into today is really the mindset holding teachers back from ditching the classroom. So I kind of want to just start off with what are some common misconceptions that teachers have about this profession and their ability to leave it?
So that is an amazing question. I think that mindset is pretty much the majority of anything when it comes to making those tough decisions. And I think that a big part of our misconceptions about teaching comes down to kind of like what we expected teaching to be like versus what it actually ends up being like. You know, especially for those of us who grew up with this dream of being a teacher, I feel pretty comfortable saying that probably what we expected teaching was going to be like was nothing like it
Amen.
actually ended up being. Like all the things I liked about playing school, like report cards and like disciplining kids, you know, my little stuffed animals, like those were all the things that really were terrible when it came down to actually doing them as a teacher. I think for starters, there's just this, you know, disillusion that we have about teaching. So we can, without knowing it, set ourselves up for disappointment when we see exactly just how hard teaching is. So I think that's part of it. That's where it kind of starts with some teachers, is that it just wasn't what we thought it was going to be. So it becomes that much harder to really throw yourself into a profession when you're like, wait, this is not what I signed up for. But then another thing that happens is no matter how hard teaching is, teachers are still teachers at heart, right? So most teachers aren't going to just say, forget this. This isn't what I signed up for. They're still going to give it their all because that's just what teachers do.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that actually goes too far. And I think that as teachers, a lot of times like that becomes our whole identity is being a teacher. Like we don't know anything else. We are so deeply entrenched in teaching that it becomes hard to even imagine ourselves doing something other than being inside of a classroom, because teaching is such a huge part of you once you start it, that it's hard to really separate yourself. Other options versus what you know so well. And then I think, too, the last thing is that I feel like we have this idea that by leaving the classroom, we are somehow leaving our students behind and doing our students a disservice. And I think that there are so many ways that teachers can still benefit the students and still be a really important part of their lives without actually being in the classroom, kind of just a box when it comes to that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think as teachers, like that becomes the majority of our identity. And it's so hard to shift out of that and see yourself as something else, especially if you were dreaming of being a teacher your whole life, like you and I have. But I love that you mentioned that you can still serve those students powerfully outside of the classroom where you don't have all those extra expectations, because our kids are our life. That's what we love so much about teaching. It's all the extra stuff that is not great.
Right. Well, and then I also wanted to point out too that I think another problem is just that the profession itself isn't exactly set up for like continued upward mobility for teachers. You know, our path is pretty straightforward. You can be a teacher, you can become an admin. I mean, I know there are other little paths here and there, like coaching is becoming more popular, which I love, but just teachers don't know about all the options available because the traditional path is so black and white and so limited that it really limits our thinking about like what else is there out there that we can do.
Yeah, definitely. So everybody knows listening to my show that we share different routes that teachers can take out of the classroom if they're really interested in pursuing this. So I would love your take on what you think is the best non-classroom route for teachers now.
Okay, this answer might surprise a lot of teachers, and it would have surprised me if you would have told me 10 years ago that this is the route I would take. But I truly think that having a business of some sort is the way to go for teachers who are thinking about other paths outside of the classroom. And I know that's kind of a broad answer, is just to say business, but I truly think that there are so many options for having, quote unquote side hustle these days, that is the easiest and fastest way to get to a point where you're able to leave the classroom.
Yeah, and it doesn't require, most side hustles don't require a degree. And that's the beauty about teachers, and what I always am talking about on this show is that we have the ability to learn anything we want. We're always adapting and learning new things in our classroom. And I think a lot of teachers forget that they can apply that outside of the education system. And so you can teach yourself new skills and start your own business and be really, really successful.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that teachers tend to sell themselves short for whatever reason. I think we're just a humble group of people. I really think that's what it boils down to. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think we need to be more confident in what we have to offer the world. I mean, we are like amazing human beings. Teachers are a rare breed. And I know you know what I'm talking about. So it's like, instead of thinking, like, how am I doing my kids a disservice by leaving the classroom? Think about it as like, how can I share my gift with even more people and even more children throughout the world? And if you really kind of shift your mindset that way, it becomes just amazing. But that's not an overnight shift. So it's very gradual.
But I love that because, if you're still teaching, you're limited to only impacting those 30 or so kids. Whereas if you're starting your own business, you can serve way, way, way infinitely more than that a year. So that's awesome. I'm glad you pointed that out.
And I truly don't think it doesn't matter if you choose a route where you're creating resources. It doesn't matter if you choose to start your own VA business. You still are putting your footprint on the education world in some way, shape, or form. And I think that is so cool.
You are, definitely. So what do you think makes teachers good business owners?
It's like one of those things. I always call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I never meant to be in the business world. But the longer I'm in it, the more I see like I was actually kind of made for this, because teachers are super creative. We think in a way that most people don't think. We're used to taking complicated concepts and simplifying them and making them make sense. So I think that just our ability to explain things is a huge benefit. Yeah. And we're problem solvers. Like literally you give teachers, like if you told teachers, hey, I can't blank. I mean, they would jump at the chance. It's like they're just natural born problem solvers. Like, let me see how I can help you find a solution. And they're natural born leaders. You might not feel that way if you're in the classroom, especially as an elementary teacher for some reason. I don't know why that made me sell myself short for so many years, because I was a teacher of little ones. Not that it matters, it doesn't matter the age you're teaching, but you are an amazing leader if you are a teacher of any age. And knowing how to lead a group of people is something that most people don't have experience with and don't know how to do. So there's just a lot of things that you're already doing in teaching that lend themselves really well to the business world.
Yeah. And leading the little humans is way harder than leading big humans. I'm telling you, I was a kindergarten teacher, so I know it's way harder to get a group of 20-something 6-year-olds to stand in a line and do what they're supposed to do than adults. Okay.
I totally agree. I think if any CEO in this world could put themselves in a teacher's position for like 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, they would be hiring every single teacher in the universe to do their highest paying position, because it is not for the faint of heart.
Amen. So if you could kind of go back in time and speak to that you from 5 years ago, knowing what you know now about being a business owner, what would you tell yourself?
Honestly, to just get started. Whatever it is that you're thinking about pursuing outside of the classroom, it's never going to happen if you never started. That whether that looks like getting training, learning how to do VA work, or getting more familiar with the business world, just getting started is the hardest part, but also the most important part. And I always think about, it's so simple and so cliche, but there's this quote that it says, day one or one day. Like today is either day one of your journey, or you're just going to keep sitting here and saying, one day I'll do that.
Ooh, I just got goosebumps.
But chances are, if you're waiting for one day, it's never going to happen. So
yeah.
And I just got goosebumps thinking like, oh my gosh, what if I never would have started? Like I felt so silly thinking years ago that I could do something other than teaching. But if I had never like started, then I mean, it's just crazy how life happens. Anything is possible. And again, that sounds so cliche, but it truly, truly is.
It is. And that's the difference between dream achievers and just dreamers. Dreamers, you know, you can just get stuck there and just keep thinking, I love this. I wish this could happen. I want this, but you have to take that forward momentum. And like you said, that first step is the hardest, but get a mentor, get a program that's going to guide you in whatever you're wanting to figure out. You can get that support that will help you get that forward momentum. You don't have to do it all on your own.
I agree. And even if it's something that feels little, like starting listening, like a big thing for me was I started listening to like business podcasts, and that felt weird to me. It didn't feel like I was doing much at the time, but that stuff really piles up over time and really starts to sink in. Yeah. So finding people's podcasts or on social media, I mean, gosh, we are so lucky to live in a world where you can get any information you want and find the experts that you want to teach you those things. And I think that's a great way to get started as well.
Yeah, I agree. So do you have any resources that would be helpful for someone who wants to ditch the classroom?
Absolutely. So I have 2 free Facebook groups that you can join, School of Sellers and School of Sellers 101. I would recommend the School of Sellers 101 if you are somebody who's literally just thinking about your options, you know, and you're thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to teach one. So and it's primarily for people who are interested in starting a teacher business on the TPT platform. But to go along with that, if you wanted to, like we talked about, finding trainings and things like that, we do have a course for people who want to learn how to sell on TPT, but we've taken the first module of that course and made it free for everybody. Perfect. Because I know that teachers also don't have tons of money just on resources to learn and to get these trainings. So this is kind of like a free little crash course that you can check out just to see if that's something you would even be interested in.
That's perfect. And I will have those linked in the show notes for everybody listening.
That's awesome. Thank you.
This has been amazing. I've so enjoyed having you on. I loved being on your show. I would love to ask you my favorite question. It's one that I ask on every guest interview. If someone wanted to start their Ditch the Classroom journey, but they just felt too overwhelmed, what would you tell them?
I would say that it's just really important not to sell yourself short. You have to know that you are capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. And I know that sounds like a cheesy, like motivational speaker line, but the confidence that I've gotten as a not only a teacher and a business owner, but also a human being has been probably the best thing that's come out of this whole experience for me. And if I could just instill that type of confidence in teachers who are in the classroom right now and like thinking about their options, I would do it in a heartbeat. So just believe in yourself and know that you are capable of doing it, even if it doesn't feel like that yet.
Yes, I love that so much. Thank you. Where can my listeners come connect with you, become your best friend? Because I know they're going to want to learn more from you.
So you can listen to my podcast, which is School of Sellers, or you can find us on Instagram at school.of.sellers. So School of Sellers, but with a period in between. And we are also on TikTok at School of Sellers. So you can get kind of a more silly dose of us if that's your thing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for chatting with us today and just, you know, pouring your wisdom into my listeners and helping them just believe in themselves a little more. I really, really appreciate that.
It is my pleasure. And thanks again for having me on the show. This has been such a nice, surprising connection to make with you. And I don't think it's the end of our this relationship. So thank you so much for letting me share with your audience.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. I, again, will have those links for you in the show notes. Go connect with Erin. She's amazing. You will love her. And we will see you next week. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Before you go, make sure you take a minute to subscribe to the show, leave a rating and review, and check out the show notes for a free gift to help you ditch the classroom. If you loved today's episode, can you help me share the message by taking a screenshot, tagging me on Instagram @ariana.vernier, and sharing it with your friends so we can help more mamas ditch the classroom and follow their dreams. Until next week, y'all, keep following the dreams that were placed in your heart so you too can ditch the classroom.